We hear so much about our immune systems, but have you ever heard about dendritic cells? They're like the body's own intelligence officers, constantly on patrol. They're looking out for anything that could be a threat so they can trigger our defenses. Today we're doing a deep dive into the world of dendritic cells. We've got this really interesting scientific article. It maps out like their whole developmental journey.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it.
So dendritic cells, where do they even come from?
Well, they don't just, appear out of nowhere. It's actually, it's like a rigorous training and specialization process.
Like an elite soldier kind of thing.
Exactly. So like all the different blood cells in our body, it all starts in the bone marrow.
Okay.
And it's specifically from hematopoietic stem cells, or, HSCs for short.
HSCs. Okay.
Yeah, and these HSCs, they're amazing. They're like the ultimate stem cell factories, capable of becoming any type of blood cell the body needs.
So they really are like blank slates. They can become anything.
Totally. And understanding these early stages of development is so important. I mean, if scientists can figure out how to manipulate them, just imagine. We could boost the immune response, or even suppress it when we need to.
Okay, so huge potential there for like future therapies.
Oh, absolutely.
So what's like the next step in this process? How do they go from like stem cell to dendritic cell?
So first, the HSCs differentiate into multipotent progenitors, or MPPs.
MPPs.
Yeah. Think of them as like the new recruits. They have all this potential, but they still need to choose their specialty, right?
Right.
And then those MPPs, they narrow their focus even more, and they become common myeloid progenitors, CMPs.
So they've like signed up for the immune system army, but they're not sure what their specific job is yet?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's from these CMPs that we finally get dedicated dendritic cell progenitors, DCPs.
So those are the ones who are fully committed.
Yeah, they're ready to embark on their dendritic cell destiny. No turning back now.
But they're not ready for like active duty yet.
Not quite.
Yeah.
They go through a teenage phase first, as pre-dendritic cells.
Oh, so they're still figuring things out.
Yeah, they're starting to, show some characteristics of the mature cells, but not quite there yet.
So after this teenage phase, then what?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting. The pre-dendritic cells, they can actually mature into different subtypes.
Okay, so there are different kinds of dendritic cells.
Yes.
Yeah.
And each one has its own specialized skills, its own functions. It's like choosing a specialization, within the immune system special forces.
Ooh, okay, I'm definitely hooked now. Tell me about these different subtypes. What makes them unique?
So two of the major players are the conventional dendritic cells,
Yeah.
cDCs, and then there are plasmacytoid dendritic cells,
Yeah.
pDCs.
Okay, cDCs and pDCs.
Right. Think of the cDCs as the frontline soldiers. They're the ones that are incredibly efficient at capturing antigens.
Antigens, like pieces of viruses and bacteria.
Exactly.
So like the scouts gathering intel.
Perfect analogy. And they have these incredible receptors on their surface that help them do this. They act like little grappling hooks, lashing onto those foreign invaders.
So they're really good at capturing those antigens. Then what?
Well, once they've captured those antigens, they then present them to other immune cells.
And that triggers the attack.
It's like sounding the alarm. And this ability to present antigens, it's really crucial for, long-term immunity.
So not only are they alerting the immune system that there's a threat, they're also like helping it remember the enemy for next time.
Exactly. Like giving the immune system a photographic memory so it can respond more quickly the next time that same threat shows up.
Okay, so that's why vaccines work.
Exactly. Because vaccines prime the immune system with a harmless version of the antigen, so that when the real deal comes along, those dendritic cells are ready to go. They know exactly what to do.
So that's our cDCs. What about the pDCs? What makes them the special forces?
Well, while those cDCs are focused on capturing and presenting antigens, the pDCs are more about launching a rapid and powerful attack.
Okay, so they're more offensive.
Exactly. Especially against viruses. Think of them like the heavy artillery, releasing these potent weapons called interferons.
Interferons, don't those interfere with viral replication?
Exactly. They basically put the brakes on viral spread.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're also rallying other immune cells to join the fight.
So they're multitasking, fighting the virus and calling for backup.
Yep. They're crucial for getting those viral infections under control quickly.
This is amazing. And to think that all this is happening thanks to these tiny little dendritic cells. But I'm guessing this whole process is tightly controlled, right?
Oh, for sure. It's like any elite training program. There are specific factors that guide these dendritic cells along their developmental journey.
Okay, like what?
Well, one crucial factor is something called FLT3 ligand, or, FLT3L.
Ethylcreol.
It's essential for the development of both cDCs and pDCs, like a basic training that every recruit has to go through,
So it's a requirement for all dendritic cells.
pretty much. And then you have other signals like interleukins,
Hmm.
specifically IL-3 and IL-7.
Interleukins.
Yeah, these provide additional support, like, specialized mentors guiding the development of these cells.
Okay. So they get more specialized training based on what type of dendritic cell they're going to become?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And for those frontline cDCs, there's another critical factor. It's called granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor,
Mm.
or GM-CSF,
GM-CSF?
right?
Yeah.
Think of this as like boot camp specifically for those antigen-presenting cells. They're getting prepped for their big role. And understanding these specific signals, it's a really big deal for researchers. Because if we can figure out how to control them, then we can develop therapies that can, either boost or suppress dendritic cell activity.
It's like having a toolkit to fine-tune the immune response.
Exactly.
All of this is fascinating, but how does it actually play out in real life, in terms of health and disease?
That's where it gets really interesting. Let's start with infectious diseases.
Okay, so let's see these dendritic cells in action. How do they actually help us fight off those nasty bugs that are always trying to get in?
Well, dendritic cells are the crucial link between the innate immune system, which is like our first line of defense, and the adaptive immune system.
Okay, so there's two parts to the immune system.
Right. And the adaptive system, that's the one that gives us that more targeted, long-lasting response.
And the dendritic cells are like the bridge between the two.
Exactly. They take information from the innate system, and they use it to activate the adaptive system's specialized forces. Remember those cDCs? The ones that are so good at capturing and presenting antigens.
Mm.
Well, that's how they activate the adaptive immune system. They take those little bits of pathogens and they show them to the T cells. The T cells are like the elite soldiers of the adaptive system. And they say, hey, this is the enemy. Let's mount a targeted attack.
So they're like directing traffic, making sure the right immune cells are going after the right threat.
A great way to think about it. And how effective that dendritic cell response is, that can actually determine whether the infection is controlled quickly or if it becomes a chronic problem.
So a well-trained, well-coordinated immune system is key.
Absolutely. If those dendritic cells are doing their job right, the body can mount a really fast and effective response. Clears the infection before it can cause too much trouble.
But what if things go wrong?
Well, that's when we run into problems.
Mm-hmm.
If the dendritic cells aren't capturing and presenting those antigens effectively, or if they're suppressed somehow, then that adaptive immune response might not be as strong as it needs to be.
And the infection could take hold.
Right. It could become chronic. It's like having a weak intelligence network. The troops might not get the info they need to fight effectively.
Wow. This is really showing me just how crucial dendritic cells are to, our overall health. But it sounds like their job goes way beyond just fighting infections.
Oh, definitely. Dendritic cells are involved in a whole bunch of health conditions. Cancer, autoimmune diseases, allergies. They might even be important for developing new vaccines.
Wow. That's a pretty diverse portfolio. I'm really curious to hear more about these other areas.
Let's do it. The world of dendritic cells is full of fascinating discoveries. And I'm happy to keep guiding you through it.
Okay, let's dive in. So first up, cancer. What's the connection there?
Well, the relationship between dendritic cells and cancer is complicated, but it's really fascinating. On the one hand, they can be powerful allies in the fight against cancer.
Okay, good guys.
Right, because they can recognize and present tumor antigens, which are those unique markers found on cancer cells, to the immune system. And that can potentially trigger a response that targets and destroys the cancer.
Okay, so they're doing your job, alerting the immune system that there's a dangerous enemy. But how do they even recognize those tumor antigens? Cancer cells are still our own cells, right?
Right. That's a great question because, essentially cancer cells are just like rogue versions of our own cells. But as they mutate, as they grow out of control, they start to express these proteins on their surface that are like slightly different.
Oh, interesting.
And dendritic cells are really good at spotting anything that's out of place.
So they're always on the lookout for anything suspicious.
Exactly. And once they detect those abnormal proteins, those tumor antigens, they sound the alarm. They get the immune system going.
This is like the basis of immunotherapy, right?
Exactly. Harnessing the power of the immune system to fight cancer. And dendritic cells are key players in a lot of those approaches.
But you said it's a complicated relationship. What's the other side of that?
Well, the problem is that a lot of tumors, they develop these sneaky ways to suppress the immune system.
Mm.
And that includes like interfering with dendritic cell function.
So the cancer is fighting back,
Mm.
trying to sabotage the defenses.
Yeah. Some tumors can actually release factors that suppress dendritic cell maturation or that prevent them from presenting those tumor antigens effectively.
It's like they're putting the immune system on mute.
Exactly. They're using camouflage, they're using deception to hide from the immune system. But the
Hmm.
good news is that researchers are working on ways to, tip the scales back
Yeah.
in favor of the immune system.
So how are they doing that?
Well, a lot of research is focused on either boosting dendritic cell function in the tumor microenvironment, that's like the area around the tumor, or engineering dendritic cells in the lab to be more potent, so they can really activate those anti-tumor immune responses.
So giving them like better weapons and training to fight the cancer.
Exactly.
This is amazing. So we've got these tiny cells that are playing a huge role in like this whole battle against cancer. But you mentioned earlier that dendritic cells are also involved in autoimmune diseases.
Yes.
And those are like conditions where the immune system attacks the body's own tissues. So how do they fit into that picture?
It's a great question. It's kind of like they have a dual nature. They can help maintain what we call immune tolerance, but they can also potentially contribute to autoimmune diseases.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So under normal circumstances, dendritic cells actually help prevent the immune system from attacking the body's own tissues. They help establish and maintain immune tolerance, making sure the immune system recognizes and tolerates those self-antigens, the ones that are naturally found in the body.
So they're like the peacekeepers, making sure the immune system doesn't turn on itself.
Exactly.
Okay.
But here's where the duality comes in. When things go wrong, when those dendritic cells get dysregulated or activated in the wrong way, they can actually contribute to the development of autoimmune diseases.
Wait, how does that happen?
Well, sometimes they can mistakenly present self-antigens to the immune system as if they were foreign invaders, and that can trigger an immune attack against the body's own tissues.
So it's like a case of mistaken identity.
Exactly. The immune system gets tricked into attacking its own team.
But what causes that malfunction in the dendritic cells?
That's the million-dollar question. Researchers are still trying to figure that out. There are probably lots of factors involved. Genetics, environmental triggers, maybe even infections.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes an infection can trigger an immune response that cross-reacts with those self-antigens, and that can lead to autoimmunity. So it's like the immune system gets confused.
Starts seeing its own cells as the enemy.
Right. And this breakdown in immune tolerance, that's a hallmark of those autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and type 1 diabetes.
So in these cases, the dendritic cells are actually contributing to the problem rather than solving it.
Unfortunately, yes. But the good news is that researchers are really working hard to figure out how to modulate dendritic cell function to restore that balance.
So they're trying to retrain the peacekeepers, so to speak?
Exactly. The goal is to find ways to dampen the activity of the dendritic cells that are, driving that autoimmune response, or to promote the development of the ones that can suppress the immune attack and restore tolerance.
This has been a real eye-opener. So what are like the key takeaways you want people to remember about these amazing cells?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that they're not just cells. They're really sophisticated players in our health and disease.
Yeah, they're constantly interacting with their environment and influencing that whole delicate balance of the immune system.
Right. And their ability to capture, process, and present those antigens. I mean, that's what makes them so essential for initiating and directing adaptive immunity. That's the part of our immune system that's really specific and targeted.
And we've seen how that can be used to develop new therapies, like those dendritic cell-based vaccines.
Absolutely. The potential for those is really incredible. And we're really just starting to scratch the surface of what might be possible. It's clear that dendritic cells are key players in this whole intricate world of the immune system. I mean, it's just amazing.
I'm really looking forward to learning more.
Me too. There's so much more to discover.
All right, let's dive into the next part of our deep dive.
It's amazing, right? How much power we actually have over our own immune systems.
Yeah. It's like we think of it as this, automatic thing, but we can actually impact how effective it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even down to the cellular level.
So we can actually impact those dendritic cells through our everyday choices.
For sure. Like take exercise, for instance. Studies have shown that regular exercise can actually make your dendritic cells work better.
Really? So going to the gym isn't just good for, like, my waistline.
Right. It's like giving your dendritic cells a workout, too.
Okay, I like that. A win-win.
Hmm.
So what about stress? We always hear that stress is bad for us.
Yeah. Chronic stress is definitely not your friend. It can actually suppress dendritic cell activity, and that can make you more susceptible to infections.
So stress is, like, messing with my immune system. Okay, noted. I need to manage that stress better.
It's so important. And what about diet?
Yeah, diet's got to be huge, right?
Absolutely. A healthy diet, lots of fruits and veggies, whole grains, all of that good stuff. It provides the nutrients that your immune system needs to function properly,
Yeah.
including the development and activity of those dendritic cells.
So if I want to keep my dendritic cells happy, I need to eat my fruits and veggies.
Exactly. And on the flip side, a diet that's full of processed foods, sugar, all that stuff, it can actually weaken your immune function.
So it's like feeding your immune system junk food. It's not going to perform at its best. Okay, this is definitely making me rethink my snacking habits.
It's all about those little choices we make, right?
Yeah. So we talked about exercise, stress, diet. What about sleep?
Sleep. The ultimate reset button. Yeah, well, studies have shown that when you don't get enough sleep, it can really mess with your immune function.
Really? Even just one night of bad sleep?
Well, it can start to add up. If you're constantly sleep deprived, your immune system is basically running on fumes, and those dendritic cells can't do their job as well.
So if I'm not sleeping well, I'm more likely to get sick.
It definitely increases your risk.
Okay. Prioritizing sleep is non-negotiable. I'm convinced. So basically, all of these healthy habits we're talking about, they create this, like, optimal environment for our immune systems to function at their best.
That's a great way to put it. You're supporting your overall health, and that includes your dendritic cells.
It's empowering to know that we actually have some control over these things. We can make choices that either help or hinder our immune systems.
Absolutely. It's about being proactive, making informed choices, and empowering your body to fight back.
Right. So it's not just about, like, avoiding illness. It's about actually optimizing our health.
Exactly. It's about thriving, not just surviving. And, it's really interesting to think about how these lifestyle factors might even influence how well we respond to things like vaccines.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So are you saying that our lifestyle choices could actually affect how well a vaccine works?
It's definitely possible. More research is needed, for sure, but there's growing evidence that things like stress, sleep, diet, they can all play a role.
So if we're not taking care of ourselves, we might not be getting the full benefit of that vaccine.
That's the idea. And it really highlights the importance of a holistic approach to health, taking care of your whole self, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It can actually optimize the way your immune system responds to these medical interventions.
It's like setting the stage, making sure everything is in place for our bodies to really benefit.
Exactly.
So we talked about dendritic cells and cancer. We talked about autoimmune diseases. What about allergies?
Yes, allergies. It's fascinating how those dendritic cells get involved in that too. So remember how we said that they're really good at distinguishing between, like, self and non-self?
Yeah.
Well, in allergies, the immune system overreacts to something harmless, like pollen or pet dander.
Yeah.
And that sets off this whole chain reaction that leads to those classic allergy symptoms, the sneezing, the itching, the wheezing.
So it's basically attacking something that's not a threat.
Right. And the dendritic cells, they can actually play a role in that overreaction. Sometimes they mistakenly present those allergens, those harmless things that trigger the allergy, to the immune system as if they were actually dangerous pathogens.
Oh, wow. So it's like another case of mistaken identity.
Exactly. And that's what triggers the production of those allergy-causing antibodies.
So are researchers looking into, like, ways to prevent that from happening?
Oh, absolutely. Scientists are trying to figure out ways to, like, retrain those dendritic cells so that they don't overreact to the allergens.
Interesting. So how are they doing that?
Well, one approach is to develop therapies that induce tolerance. So basically, teaching the immune system to just ignore those harmless substances.
Oh, so like desensitizing it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also research into how to modulate the dendritic cells themselves so they don't present those allergens in the first place.
It's amazing how much research is going into this and how many different ways they're trying to harness the power of these cells.
Yeah. And it really just shows how important these cells are, even though most people have never even heard of them.
Speaking of, we briefly mentioned dendritic cell-based vaccines earlier, but I'd love to hear a bit more about those. How do they work?
Oh, dendritic cell-based vaccines are super exciting. It's basically a way to train the immune system to target a specific pathogen, or even cancer cells.
So, like personalized training for the immune system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they take dendritic cells from the patient, either from their blood or they grow them in the lab. And then they load those cells up with specific
The
antigens.
antigens are like what the immune system needs to recognize, right?
Mhm. Right. It's like a blueprint to the enemy.
And then those dendritic cells are put back into the patient.
Yes. And then those prime cells, they go on to activate other immune cells, like those
Wow.
T cells we talked about earlier. And that triggers a very targeted immune response against whatever those antigens represent, whether it's a virus, bacteria, or even a tumor.
So we're basically creating a highly specialized army trained to attack that specific target.
That's a great analogy. And the potential is huge. They're looking at this approach for so many different diseases: HIV, malaria, cancer, even autoimmune diseases.
This is incredible. We've covered so much in this deep dive.
Yeah.
How dendritic cells develop, their role in all these different conditions, and even how our lifestyle choices can affect them. What are some final thoughts you want to leave our listener with for this part of our exploration?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About all this stuff that's happening inside us all the time. We have no idea.
It's true, like these dendritic cells just doing their thing, keeping us healthy.
Silently working away.
Yeah, behind the scenes. So we talked about infections, cancer, allergies. Are there other areas where dendritic cells are like showing promise, in research?
Oh, for sure. One area that's really exciting is personalized immunotherapy.
Personalized medicine. So like treatments that are tailored to like an individual's genes and stuff. How does that work with dendritic cells?
So imagine this. We take a patient's own dendritic cells and we engineer them in the lab to target specific antigens that are unique to their tumor.
So it's like a custom designed immune response just for
Yeah.
their cancer.
Exactly. And it have the potential to be so much more effective than, traditional treatments. Fewer side effects, better chances of success.
Wow. So we could have therapies that are as unique as the people they're treating.
That's the goal.
And it's all thanks to these tiny little cells. It's mind-blowing. So we've gone through like their whole journey from development to all these roles they play in health and disease. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. What do you think dendritic cells can teach us about health in general? Like how everything's connected.
But that's a great point.
Yeah.
I think what dendritic cells really show us is that the immune system isn't isolated. It's connected to everything else that's going on in the body. What you eat, how much you sleep, your stress level, it all matters.
It's like they're reflecting our overall health.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we want to support our immune system, we need to take care of our whole selves. Mind, body, everything.
Exactly. It's about creating that healthy environment inside so our immune cells can thrive.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible, a real glimpse into the world of dendritic cells, these microscopic powerhouses that are so essential to our health. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just remember that even though they're tiny, their impact is huge. They're always there, working to protect us. And the more we understand about them, the better we can take care of ourselves.
Well said. This has been such an informative and inspiring journey. It's amazing to think how much more there is to learn about dendritic cells and the potential they have to like revolutionize medicine.
I know, it's really exciting.
Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. And to our listeners, we hope you enjoyed this exploration into the incredible world of dendritic cells. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep taking care of your amazing immune system.